Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Here.
Mr. Franco.
I'm here.
Mr. Cabrera.
Here. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, the notice requirements have been satisfied as to the time, place, and date of holding said meeting by posting notice on the bulletin board here in Borough Hall and by mailing and emailing same to the Herald of Cape May County, the Gazette Leader, and the Press of Atlantic City on October 13th, 2021, as well as the change of meeting place and time to the same publications on December 30th, 2021, and notice of changing meeting place to the same publications also on January 6, 2022. In the event of an emergency, your exit is your back right or your front left or our front right. This meeting is being shown live here today on YouTube and also on Facebook Live. If anyone has any comments or questions that are listening on our virtual settings and or on YouTube and including Facebook, you also have the ability to call in by way of conference call. The borough's conference line is 888-363-4734, and when prompted, you're going to enter the access code 969-902-0, followed by the pound or the hashtag. If you watch this recorded meeting on any of those venues, you can also email our clerk at wildwoodcrest.org or call 609-729-8040. Madam Clerk, may we have the ordinances, please?
Yes, sir. The first is ordinance number 1369 for recreation fees.
Motion, ordinance number 1369 be placed on a second reading and final passage by title only.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1369 be placed on second and final reading by title only.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Ordinance 1369 reads as follows. An ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 56 of the Code of the Borough of Wildwood Crest, entitled Recreation Commission, Section 56-3, approving and confirming rates and fees for the rental of facilities, participation in certain events and activities.
Motion that a public hearing now be held on ordinance number 1369.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a public hearing on ordinance number 1369 now be held.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Floor is open for public comments. Anybody here in person have any public comments, questions, statements on ordinance number 1369? Going once. Going twice. I'm going to go to the conference line. Is there anybody on the conference line that has any questions with respect to ordinance number 1369? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public meeting.
Motion.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that a public hearing on ordinance number 1369 now be closed.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Excuse me. Motion that public hearing number, ordinance number 1369 will be closed.
Be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Yes. Excuse me.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1369 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next, we have ordinance 1370, and it reads as follows. A bond ordinance appropriating $7,500,000 and authorizing the issuance of $6,931,961 bonds or notes of the borough for various improvements or purposes authorized to be undertaken by the Borough of Wildwood Crest in the county of Cape May, New Jersey.
Motion that ordinance number 1370 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for the second and final reading and public hearing February 16th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m.
I'll second it.
It has been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1370, passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for second and final reading and public hearing on February 16th, 2022 at 5:30 PM.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next, we have ordinance 1371, and it reads as follows. An ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 41, litter, of the Code of the Borough of Wildwood Crest to prohibit the release of balloons.
Motion that ordinance 1371 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for second and final reading, public hearing on February 2nd, 2022 at 9:30 a.m.
Second that?
It has been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1371 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for second and final reading and public hearing on February 2nd, 2022 at 9:30 a.m.
Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next, we have the resolutions. The first is authorizing temporary 2022 capital budget. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing the state aid agreement between the Department of Environmental Protection and the Borough of Wildwood Crest for the construction of the Hereford Inlet to Cape May Inlet, New Jersey Hurricane and Storm Damage Reduction Project, number 6040-WC-1.
Motion.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing a license agreement between the Borough of Wildwood Crest and Richard E. Pearson Construction Company, Inc. for construction activities in connection with the Cape May County MUA Rosemary Road Pump Station bulkhead replacement.
Motion.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing the option to renew Trinity Code agreement for calendar year 2022 for on-site inspections and plan review agencies for the following subcodes: plumbing, electrical, fire protection, and building.
Motion.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Lastly is authorizing appointment of Ronald Harwood as Office of Emergency Management Coordinator for calendar year 2022.
Motion that?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Can I get a motion that all bills properly authorized as submitted be paid?
Yes. Motion.
I'll second it.
It has been moved and seconded that all bills properly authorized as submitted be paid. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Entertain a motion for reports?
Can I get a motion that all reports received from the court administrator, CFO, tax collector, chief of police, supervisor for the recreation department, construction official, emergency services coordinator for the EMS, and the Wildwood Crest Volunteer Fire Company chief for the month ending December 31st, 2021 be accepted as presented?
Motion?
Second. Excuse me.
It has been moved and seconded that all reports received from the court administrator, CFO, tax collector, chief of police, supervisor for the recreation department, construction official, emergency services coordinator for the EMS, and the Wildwood Crest Volunteer Fire Company chief for the month ending December 31st, 2021 be accepted as presented. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Motion that all minutes from regular scheduled commission meeting dated December 22nd, 21, and January 4th, 2022 be approved and presented.
Second that?
It has been moved and seconded that all minutes from the regularly scheduled commission meetings dated December 22nd, 2021, and January 4th, 2022 be approved as presented. Roll call. Mr. Schiff.
Yes.
Mr. Franco.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to our administrator's report.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. For a COVID update, the Cape May County Health Department has been providing weekly updates on COVID cases within the county. According to the county, the rate of transmission of COVID is continuing to fall at this time. The website covidactnow.org measures the transmission rate in Cape May County at 1.05 compared to last week at 1.23. Anytime the transmission rate is above 1.0, or they call it the RT, it can be said that the spread of COVID-19 is increasing. If the RT continues this trend and dips below 1.0, new cases will be declining locally at that point. The Cape May County Department of Health continues to offer multiple COVID vaccine clinics every week throughout the county to provide options for its residents. These clinics provide initial doses as well as booster shots of the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines. Please visit the Cape May County Health Department's website for locations and times each week. Ongoing and upcoming projects, the beach end bump outs. We have resubmitted our application to the Cape May County Open Spaces Board to obtain special recreational funding in the amount of $2.5 million for the ongoing construction of the beach bump outs south of Rambler. The Open Spaces Board has made their recommendation for this funding to the county commissioners. Once the 45-day comment period is up, the funding award can be made. We also have received 2 DCA Small Cities grants toward this project, totaling close to $800,000, as well as a $50,000 DCA recreational grant. So we're well on our way to collecting a lot of money from outside sources for this particular project. Pacific Avenue, as everyone is aware, South State has commenced work on the concrete portion of this county project. Work is expected to proceed until May 13th from Rambler to St. Louis. The second phase of the project will take place in the fall of 2022 with a scheduled completion prior to Labor Day of 2023. Pertinent information regarding the county's project will be posted on the borough's website as we receive it for the taxpayers' convenience. Scoop Taylor Park, this project is complete with the exception of the installation of a shelter, which is going in the circular area. That is scheduled to arrive on or about February 1st. This project received fiscal year 2020 Small Cities funding for ADA improvements. Higbee Field, the Little League Field, our contractor is currently completing construction on a new home dugout and improvements to the field house, including 2 new bathrooms. As you will recall, this project is being completed in 2 different phases. The first phase included the replacement of the visitor dugout and the concession stand, which were damaged in a windstorm. The cost of construction for phase 1 was covered by our insurance, as this was a wind damage claim, and the second phase of the construction is being funded in-house. Hereford Inlet to Cape May Inlet Beach and Dune construction, the required state aid agreement has been authorized just a few moments ago. And once all 4 participating municipalities have done so, the state will complete negotiations for all necessary easements, and the Army Corps will finalize their construction plans to move forward on a 99% plan or 90% plan, which will be provided to us for review and comment. It is expected that the Army Corps will begin construction on this dune and beach berm in 2023. We're expecting that to happen in the fall at this point. As a side note, we did receive word yesterday that our efforts to obtain a CAFR permit for storage units on the Beach Patrol area would not be affected by this particular project, because there was a need for the Army Corps and the DEP to make comments on that application due to the upcoming project. New Jersey Avenue. Nothing new to report at this time, as the county's reconstruction of New Jersey Avenue has been delayed due to the Pacific Avenue project delay. That project being split into 2 years is going to cause a little bit of a delay with New Jersey Avenue being reconstructed. Sunset Lake State Channel dredging. We are working with the NJDOT to have the state dredge their state channel, and have requested that they move this channel to follow the Wildwood Crest shoreline. This would move the channel more into Wildwood Crest than it is now. Currently, only a very small portion of it rests in Wildwood Crest, and provide better navigation in appropriate areas. This would also financially benefit the taxpayers of the Crest. We do have a meeting scheduled with NJDOT Scott Douglas this Friday. CAFRA applications. In an ongoing effort to remain compliant with the state's coastal management rules, the borough has been working on 2 separate CAFRA permits. The first permit was submitted already and seeks to permit Beach Patrol storage adjacent to the Beach Patrol headquarters, while the second is still being worked on and would permit the following five items: Dune and beach maintenance activities, which are our routine activities, including beach raking, movement of sand, things of that nature, the ability to put seasonal objects on the beach, all those types of things. Beach path improvements north of Rambler, the widening of the pedestrian accesses through the dunes north of Rambler, the old library site improvements, which include expanded parking and water main looping. So those things are all on the next permit. There are 5 items, and that is being worked on right now for submission to CAFRA, to DEP. That is all I have.
Connie? Public, any questions for our administrator? Anybody on the conference line have any questions for our administrator on the administrator's report? Lastly, governing body, any questions for Connie?
I do not.
You're not? Okay. Moves us on to our next report is our CFO report. Francine Springer. Welcome to the head table. We're going to move right on to the engineer's report. Mr. de Blasio.
So thank you. My report's Connie's report. That's a tough act to follow. But in all seriousness, borough's capital construction projects are starting to move out of hibernation now with the weather hopefully getting better. The work for the reconstruction of Washington Avenue is ongoing. All of the utility and concrete work has been completed, and the roadway base paving is scheduled to start within the next 2 weeks, weather permitting. Barring any unforeseen issues, that road should be completed way in advance of May of this year. Similarly, the reconstruction of Beach Avenue the contractor has installed all of the water main and continues to install the water services for the foot wash showers on the east side of the bike path. Again, that project is ahead of schedule and should be done way in advance of May of this year. Lastly, the pre-construction meeting for the renovation of the old library was held on December 16th of last year, and work is ongoing. Our office has approved submittals. We've probably processed about 60-something submittals to get materials ordered by the contractor. And in fact, the contractor has mobilized to the site to start demolition. So all is proceeding on schedule with that project as well. And lastly, I do not have any updates relative to grants, but Connie had mentioned the Cape May County Open Space Grant for the remaining beach bump outs, which was a large grant, and that's really good news for the borough. That's my report.
Okay. Governing body, any questions for Mr. de Blasio?
I do not.
Neither do I.
Public,
Thank you.
any questions for Mr. de Blasio on the engineer's report? Hearing none. Anybody on the conference line have any questions for our engineer? Okay, we're going to move on to correspondence. I received one email. I won't read it, but it basically, just to give everybody an overview, it acknowledges during the most recent, not the most recent, the very first snowstorm that we received in the area, 2 of the Public Works employees helping, going out of their way to help a senior resident, husband and wife, bring back their cans. They were trying to move them in through the snow, and they had stopped their truck and went to help this couple bring their cans back to their respective homes. And the couple sent our Superintendent Bond an email, which they in turn forwarded to me to give praise to Marcus and Carmen. So, Mr. Bond, if you could let Marcus and Carmen know the borough and the governing body and administration very much appreciates their efforts. I think this is a testament of living in a small community, and certainly Public Works did a great job during both snowstorms. It's not always easy. You're always going to get some complaints, but overall, generally speaking, I received personally nothing but positive reviews on getting the snow off the streets and acting quickly even throughout the night. So good job, Joe, and pass it on to the rest of the team if you can. Okay, that takes care of the correspondence that we received since the
Mr.
last.
Mayor, can I go on the record?
Yes.
The resolution for Ron Harwood should read calendar years 2022 through 2024. It's a 3-year appointment.
3-year appointment. Mr. Harwood, do you accept that 3-year appointment? Yes, sir. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Okay. First round of public comments on anything on the agenda. Public comments, anything. Anybody on the conference line have any public comments before we move into new business? All right, Mr. de Blasio, I believe you have a prior appointment. If you need to leave now, you're more than welcome to leave, or if you want to leave in the middle whenever you feel free, you're more than welcome.
I'm gonna stay for a little bit longer. if
All right,
that's
you're having
okay
so
with
much
the mayor.
fun, you wanted to stay. I
Yeah.
got it, I understand. Okay, first on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Robert Belasco, just to kind of give everybody an overview. So the previous administration, I'm gonna say one around 2019, there was some discussion then, and it resurrected itself to potentially merge the planning board and the zoning board together, or in essence, just have one board to service both of those respective functions of those boards. At the time, the governing body wasn't ready to do so. I think there's some advantages and there might be some disadvantages, so we asked Mr. Belasco to come here today to make a presentation to the governing body and hear what he has to say, and then the governing body can certainly weigh in. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. As the Mayor indicated, approximately 2 years ago, I was here and I gave a similar presentation on the consolidation of our planning and zoning boards. Just so everyone's aware, right now we do have a planning board which consists of 9 members and 2 alternates. We also have a zoning board of adjustment which consists of 7 members and 2 alternates. The function of those boards are distinct in the sense that the planning board deals with the preparation of the borough's master plan. They review ordinances which you all pass, which propose changes to the land development ordinance. They also make recommendations relative to proposed changes to the land development ordinance. And primarily, the applications which the planning board hears are tied to proposed minor or major subdivisions, division of land, existing lots, moving lot lines. They also hear site plan applications, which are your larger developments. Some of the hotels we've recently seen erected or renovated over the years have come into the boards for site plan approval. As a component of those applications, there's also the ability for the planning board to grant C variance relief. And just so everyone's aware, C variances are tied to your area and bulk requirements: building height, setbacks, lot coverage, building coverage, and so on and so forth. Your zoning board is a little different in the sense that the zoning board is permitted to hear under the Municipal Land Use Act appeals of the administrative officers of the municipalities, denial of an application. They're also permitted to hear interpretations of the land development ordinance. So sometimes there's questions in terms of how an ordinance should apply, and individuals can apply to those boards, to the zoning board specifically, and ask the board to give an interpretation, what the board thinks it means and how it should be applied. And in addition to that, the big variances that the zoning board hears are D variances. And those variances are tied to proposed uses which aren't permitted in a particular zone, expansion of existing non-conforming uses, conditional use variances. So those are uses which are permitted in a zone, but which are tied to specific conditions. So in order for them to be permitted, you've got to meet all those specific conditions. If you don't, you've got to get what's known as a D3 variance from the board. In addition, there's density variances, floor area ratio variances, which really aren't applicable in Wildwood Crest. We don't have a floor area ratio ordinance. And finally, building height variances. So any building which is proposed to exceed 10 feet or 10% of the permitted height requires a more technical variance from the zoning board. So that's just a little bit of background in terms of the functions of both boards, which incidentally I know most of you are aware of. Some of you have sat on the boards prior to your appointment or your election to the position of commissioner. So with respect to consolidation, I can report that this is a trend which over the years has increased. Many municipalities throughout the state have elected to consolidate their planning and the zoning boards for a number of different reasons. The legislature modified the municipal land use law back in 1985 to allow this to happen. And essentially it results in the dissolution of the zoning board and those powers which the zoning board is responsible for implementing or using. They get subsumed by the planning board. So the planning board more or less steps into that role and has the ability to oversee those D variances, the appeals, and the interpretation. The ordinance, or rather the statute's been amended several times over the years. And it's really been amended to deal with population size. As it currently reads, municipalities having a population of 15,000 or less are permitted to dissolve the zoning board and to move forward with one consolidated land use board. Essentially, if you consolidate the board, you have a 9-member consolidated land use board with 2 alternates, and you can increase the number of alternates to 4 alternates. If a D variance comes in, an interpretation or an appeal of the administrative officer's denial of a zoning permit, what happens in that situation, your Class 1 and your Class 3 member, and I'll give you a little background on that. So Class 1 member is either the mayor or the mayor's designee. A Class 2 member is an employee or an official of the municipality. In this case, our code enforcement officer is our Class 2 member. And a Class 3 member is another one of the members of the governing body. I believe at this time, Mr. Commissioner Schiff, you are our Class 3 member.
That's true.
Class 4 members are volunteers, members of the general public who live in the community who are appointed to the board for a set term. If a D variance, an interpretation, or appeal were to come before the board, the Class 3 and Class 1 member would both have to recuse themselves. So you'd have a 7-member board which would hear those specific types of applications. With respect to the consolidations of the board, it's done by ordinance. And I say consolidation, it's really a dissolution of your zoning board. So you all would pass an ordinance which dissolves the zoning board, and then the planning board steps into that role. Now, there are many municipalities that have done this. By way of example, the city of Wildwood has a planned or consolidated land use board, as does North Wildwood and as does West Wildwood. It's really just a preference point. There are pros and cons in terms of why a municipality would do that, and I'll get into those shortly. The interesting thing about the D variances, the interpretation, and the appeals is that while the mayor and the commissioner would have to recuse themselves or abstain from those votes, alternates can't step into their place. So zoning boards and the relief that they grant are tied to a 7-member board, and that needs to maintain consistency. Now, with respect to some of the pros of consolidation, obviously it results in professional savings. You're not paying a solicitor, you're not paying an engineer to be present at 2 meetings a month. You generally have 1 meeting. Obviously, your utility expenses go down. You don't need to keep the power on or keep the lights on, the heat on if we're not here meeting. There's also an elimination of conflict, potential conflict that comes up between both boards. So by way of example, there have been situations where the planning board makes recommendations in terms of how they believe the zoning ordinance should be modified. You all ultimately have the final say as to whether that takes place. But there have been situations where, in the recent past, where the planning board has proposed changes, they've been enacted, and then at a meeting or two after the ordinance becomes comes into effect, variance relief's been given to applicants before the zoning board. Not to any fault of the zoning board, but those, obviously there is somewhat of a disconnect. One hand acts and the other hand learns about it after the fact. So that gets eliminated in a lot of respects if your planning board's proposing recommendations or recommending changes. They would be the board, the entity which hears any variance application which is tied to that specific type of relief. In addition, there's approved deficiency. So what I mean by that point is you have one board which is hearing all these applications. They're familiar with everything that's going on in the town. Individual applicants, developers, they get a feel for the way in which those boards act. They get a feel for what to expect from individual members, how they view different types of applications or relief. And in addition to that, they get an understanding in terms of the vision of the borough, what the board sees as an appropriate direction for different types of applications. Finally, and this kind of goes into what I said previously, it's a one-stop shop. So you're coming before one board, you know where you're going for planning board relief, which is your site plans, your subdivisions, and you know where you're going if you need a D variance. It's the same entity, it's the same meeting. There's no confusion about what night you have to be before the board. Some of the cons that come along with it are potential attendance issues, and I think this is more or less a function of where we reside. We have a lot of snowbirds, so to speak, people who are here during the primary summer months and spring months, and a lot of people go away. That really hasn't been too big of a problem for us. A lot of our members who are on these boards, they may miss a meeting or two, but by and large they're here and they attend these meetings and they provide good feedback. In addition to that, there is a potential for more work for the board members. So remember, these are volunteers. They're giving their time back to the community to hear these types of applications. You don't have two boards which are hearing multiple applications. You have one board. So it can result in longer meetings. It can result in additional work. I haven't really seen that to be a problem in Wildwood or North Wildwood. Just so you're all aware, I'm the solicitor in both of those towns as well for the Planning and Zoning Board. And there are nights when we have 4 or 5 applications on, but we knuckle down and we get through it. There's also a potential for the need to have special meetings on occasion. So sometimes you have larger applications which come in, and this is obviously at the board's discretion. If there's a backlog of applications, in some situations it makes sense to move forward with a special meeting in order to try to weed through some of that stuff. But that's a case-by-case basis. It's not something that you all need to consider that these boards are going to be mandated or required to do. So I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons in a lot of respects. And I did go back through the last year, and I wanted to give you all a synopsis of the amount of applications that we've had compared to the neighboring municipalities as well. So North Wildwood over the 2021 calendar year had a total of 26 applications. The city of Wildwood had a total of 30 applications, and the city of Wildwood has a pretty significant backlog right now. There's a lot of development that's going on in that town at this juncture. So I do foresee potentially 1 or 2 special meetings this year in order to weed through with some of that. The borough of West Wildwood is a bit of an outlier. They've had 1 application over the last year. Incidentally, we do have 3 coming in this Thursday, and it does appear that development is going to increase in that municipality moving forward. But with respect to Wildwood Crest, we've had 6 planning applications over the last year, and we've had 9 zoning applications. So you're talking 15 in Wildwood Crest compared to 26 in North Wildwood and 30 in Wildwood. As far as consolidation is concerned, Mr. Galzunas and I have had a number of discussions about the membership of the board and how that ultimately takes place if the zoning board is dissolved. The statute's clear that the ordinance would dissolve the zoning board and those powers would be subsumed or absorbed by the planning board. There is not an ability under the law, and there's a bit of a gray area in this. It doesn't explicitly indicate that you can merge your boards and pick a hybrid of members. So you can pick some of your planning board members and some of your zoning boards and combine them to create a new consolidated land use board. I've spoken to some other planning and zoning board solicitors. I've also contacted the New Jersey Planning Officials Association in New Jersey, and the consensus is that you can't pick and choose. It's not been tested, though, so the law is somewhat unclear on that. But the way you read the ordinance, the way I read the ordinance, I think it's clear that if you dissolve your planning board, those members are essentially discharged from their duties, from their positions as volunteers, and the planning board then takes over those powers. In the event the boards are consolidated, one of the things that I think you need to be aware of is that, let's say in the future there's a significant volume of planning and zoning applications, and there's a need to create a zoning board. The order in which, or the way in which you do that is very clear, and it's also set forth in the statute, Section 25 of the land use law. It provides that the board needs to be created by voter referendum. So the municipality adopts an ordinance which proposes a public question, and then that's ultimately put to the voters to determine whether or not that zoning board should be reconstituted. So that's more or less the process. It is fairly straightforward. I'm here to answer any questions that you all have. So fire away if you have them.
I had one that was basically answered. It was if we find that it's too much, I didn't know it had to go to a referendum. I thought that we could just decide it and move it on.
Now, the ordinance, it's Section C of Section 25, subchapter C. It's very clear that in order to reconstitute that board, it has to be done by an ordinance which proposes a public question, which is then submitted to voter referendum.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Franco?
How many members are on the Wildwood Planning Board?
We have 9 regular members. I believe we're permitted up to 4 alternates. Now, there's been some turnover in the city of Wildwood recently, and I think there is at least 1, possibly 2 vacancies. We just had some new appointments, some new alternates appointed. So if we're short, I think we're only short 1 member at this juncture.
And North Wildwood?
North Wildwood has a full board, 13 members. 9 regular members and 4 alternates.
And currently we have 9 and 2.
Correct.
2 alternates.
On the planning, and then the zoning is 7 and 2.
Thank you.
So, Rob, so here's my issue, or not really an issue. So, do I like the idea of having one board? I do. I like the savings and the organizational that goes on with that, just having one meeting and one board to hear everything. My question is probably related to, if we're gonna have one board, I mean, from my standpoint, I'd like to have the best board we possibly can have. And I know over the years, it's like whoever wants to be on a board, raise your hand and we'll put you on the board and so forth. And some are into it and some aren't. I'm trying to get the folks that are into it on one board to have Wildwood Crest. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying to get the people that are going to have the most input, lively discussion for the benefit of Wildwood Crest. So how would we be, so if the idea would be to dissolve the zoning board and have the planning board run course, I would venture to say there might be some strong people on the zoning board that we would want to sit on the planning board. So how would we effectuate that to happen?
So Mayor, you ask a good question, and first and foremost, I want to say we have two great boards. The people who are on these boards, they really give a lot of their own time. They provide great insight. They ask good questions, and they take this process extremely seriously. They do have Wildwood Crest's best interest at heart. The only way in which you could, well, again, under the law, everything's really fact sensitive, right? So, depending upon facts and the language in an applicable statute or any applicable case law, you can probably present an argument, 1, 2, or you put 100 lawyers in a room, you're going to get 100 different answers. That's just our nature. So the statute, though, is clear in that you dissolve your zoning board. Your planning board members remain as they exist. Those individuals stay on the board. It's gray, though, because it's not been tested. There has not been any case law decided in the state of New Jersey which speaks to your question of almost dissolving both boards and then picking individual members and creating a hybrid board. It's a method which some municipalities have utilized in the past. The Cox and Koenig land use book, which is essentially the Bible for land use attorneys and planners and engineers, is very specific, and I'm going to read the one section in this situation. Bear with me, it's short, but I just think it really gets the point across. So some municipalities have enacted ordinances which purport to abolish both the Planning and the Zoning Board of Adjustment and create a new consolidated land use board. Although the issue has not been litigated, it does not appear that the legislation discussed ever contemplated such a procedure. The statute speaks of vesting powers of the Zoning Board of Adjustment in the existing Planning Board. Where municipalities have followed the practice of abolishing both boards, it results in giving the appointing authority power to completely replace an existing planning board, a result probably never contemplated by the legislature. But I think one of the key things in that paragraph is that there's no case law, there's no interpretation from the legislature that says you can or you can't do that. The individuals that write this book, that update this book, don't necessarily see that that's a lawful way in which to consolidate your boards, and frankly, I tend to agree. I mean, I think the statute's more or less pretty clear in terms of if you abolish the board, the planning board takes over that function. So I've had some discussions with Mr. Galzunas, and I've thought about it extensively, and I think really the only way in which you have power as a governing body in order to merge those boards and appoint some of the zoning board members would be to just send letters to individual members and explain why you're doing what you're doing, what the proposal entails, what the result would be, and respectfully ask if they would consider resigning from their positions so that you can determine who should or which members would be reappointed to that consolidated board. I don't think it's out of line. I don't think it crosses a line. It obviously could ruffle some feathers because these people are volunteers who are giving their own time, but that's really the only legal way in which I can see providing the governing body with the ability to take members from the zoning board and put them on the planning board. You can increase the number of alternates from 2 to 4, so you could appoint 2 members from your zoning board as alternates to the planning board. The only limitation or downside to that is they're alternates. So if you have 9 regular members who attend that are on the planning board, your alternates don't have a vote in that situation. They can participate, but their vote isn't included in the actual decision to approve or deny an application.
Okay, so confirming the numbers here, so a merged board, and I'm using that term loosely, would be 9 members plus 4 alternates, right?
Correct.
Okay, and currently we have 9 members serving on the planning board,
That's correct.
plus 2.
Correct.
Okay, so that would be 11, so,
I think there's a vacancy right now, Mr.
okay,
Mayor.
okay. So if we were to, so basically, in essence, dissolve the zoning board, we have a pool of, let's see, 9 plus 1 now, because you said we're missing 1, right? So we have 10 people that are currently sitting on the planning board that I would say, hey, if you want to continue to serve, you're more than welcome to, but before we merge this, if you want to step down, now's the time to step down, and then the people from the zoning board that have been dissolved could be, I'll call it first up, for lack of a better term, that the governing body could consider to appoint to anyone that may have any vacancies that are on the planning board.
Correct.
Fair statement?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I see we have members of the planning board and the zoning board here. Any comments for the governing body? Pros, cons, issues, questions? Any thoughts?
Just a couple quick thoughts. Patrick Davenport, I'm chairman of the planning board right now. I've been a member of the planning board for close to 17 years, probably, give or take. I think Mr. Valesco did an excellent job outlining the benefits of both the planning and zoning board, the combination, and the detriments. It was very thorough. Just from, I mean, besides the simple things with professional fees and having 2 meetings versus 1, I would say that 2 things that stick out to me is just basically having a consistent vision for the borough moving forward. The planning board does a lot of work with the master plan. We do a lot of work with the borough planner on kind of looking to the future, seeing what has worked, what hasn't worked, and make some changes. And I think just having a board that would handle all of that could provide a more consistent vision. Second thing is, like I said, I've been on the planning board for a long time. It's not easy. Every day is a learning experience. You never get to that point where, oh, I kind of have everything figured out, because there's just too much information. So with that, hopefully there'll be a little bit less turnover on the board. Maybe it'll allow for some more seasoned members, because like I said, every day is a learning day. So maybe the borough would see kind of, Mayor, where you were going with it, trying to pull maybe the most consistent attendees, the most people that are looking to learn and move that forward. The borough might have a stronger board in terms of the education of their board. Those are the 2 things. Either way, kind of responding to Mr. Velasco, I do feel we have 2 really good boards in place, so there really isn't a wrong decision here. And it's really up to the commissioners to kind of feel for what's the best direction. But I just see those 2 being the most important factors.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Patrick, thanks for your work on the board. I work with you, and you guys are great.
Thank you.
Do a nice job keeping us together.
Okay, so just a couple quick hitters. So to dissolve the zoning board would need an ordinance, right?
That's correct.
Once it's dissolved, if in fact the borough needed to put the zoning board back in place, it needs to be by referendum. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that. If we are going to move forward in this direction, the planning board would ultimately serve as the board, subject to anyone stepping down with an informative letter that says, hey, here's what we're going to do, now's the time. But the zoning board members would, in essence, that would be dissolved, and they would no longer be serving on the zoning board. So I think all of that request to the volunteer members, I'm very not concerned. I just want to make sure that our volunteers have a very good understanding as to the pros of what we're trying to accomplish, and I want to make sure that they, especially the zoning board, because they're the ones that are losing their positions, know that that their position is respected. But I also believe that people need to see the vision as to what we're actually trying to accomplish, and that there is an opportunity to serve on this new board if and when anyone steps down from the planning board. And I think all of that needs to be summarized in some sort of a letter to all of the members of both the planning and zoning boards prior to us introducing an ordinance, or maybe it kind of runs parallel. So I'll leave those details to maybe Mr. Gazunas and Mr. Belasco to work with Trish and Connie to keep the governing body apprised, but we can certainly get the ordinance in place whenever you feel is necessary, assuming that my fellow commissioners are on board with that respective plan.
And Mayor, I wanted to add one more thing. So if the governing body is electing to move forward with consolidation, I understand you all have to have discussions about that. As far as timing is concerned, I would ask that we review pending applications that are in the pipeline currently, because we have 3 zoning board applications scheduled for February, and I don't particularly think this would be done by February, but my concern is for applicants and notice. So we'd have a new meeting date. There are there are applications pending before the zoning board, which have already advertised that our application is going to be heard this night. They've sent out public notice to individuals within 200 feet. So I think that's something that if you all elect to move forward in the direction of consolidating the boards, Mr. Galzunas and I and Ms. Duffy from the Construction and Zoning Office can have a discussion and notify applicants who may not have advertised and noticed that
Good point.
there will be a consolidated board, and this is the date that your application would be heard for notice
It's
purposes.
a good point, Rob. Good point. Yep. Guys all right with
Fine
that?
with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you, guys.
Got it. Okay, that ends the discussion on the item number 1 on the new business. Item number 2
I wasn't gonna miss that.
is the electric vehicle ordinance. I believe, Connie, would you mind overviewing the electric vehicle ordinance?
This is an ordinance that is effective already. It's already a law which was promulgated by Public Law 2021, Chapter 171. It's a model ordinance, and only certain parts of this ordinance can be changed by a municipality, and they're all highlighted here for you. Basically, it's to have make-ready or available parking spaces associated with the electric charging stations. So it lays out the parameters in which we can operate and issue summonses, et cetera. But also, the state put this in because they want to have places for people to charge up and down the state of New Jersey. They're trying to encourage it. So they want us to have spaces that are ready for this change and ready for the new fleet of vehicles they expect to be on the road in the next few years. So, and by the way, we do have a grant application in right now for 2 spaces, 1 charging station with 2 outlets for the old library project we're working on now. And there are future talks about, we've been talking about some future locations as well so that we have these make-ready spaces available. But there are certain areas of this law, which is already in effect, that we can have some say in and manipulate, and those are listed in here.
Okay, so the draft ordinance that's in our packet, that's the draft ordinance, right?
This is the model that they
Model,
expect
okay.
us to use, and with the guidelines of what we are allowed to change and not. But this was promulgated, a lot of times with the DCA or with the DEP will do in different sections of the government, they don't necessarily, the legislation does not come up with a law, and then it goes through the process with senators, goes to Senate, goes to your representatives for vote. This is promulgated, so this is a public law. It's Chapter 171, and it is already law because it was published in the New Jersey Register, and there's certain time frames that go with that, but already a promulgated law. It's just that you do have some say in how you would like to tailor it to suit the needs of your municipality.
Gotcha. Okay, Solicitor Galzunas, I think you can have a draft ready for,
I do, I can circulate it.
all right. Got anybody, any questions on the electric vehicle
I have one.
potential? Go ahead.
Connie, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm probably wrong, but I didn't see anything in here about the charge of us, or are we charging for the electric charge of their car? It's like paying for gas.
We can, and we already, Francine and I did a lot of research on that when we went to Atlantic City for a day to walk on the floor at the convention center, so that's generally where you'll find vendors that offer this type of service. And we did find too, and what we found was that everything is done through an app on your phone with these charging stations. So we purchased the charging station, or we can lease them. We have 2 options. We have to put the infrastructure in the ground, and it was noted that we should put that infrastructure in for more than what we need. Because if we do it after the fact, we would be disrupting cement work and site work that we've already done. So to avoid that, we should put the infrastructure in the ground in advance and put more than we possibly would need in the first couple of years. Once the installation occurs and that structure is put in, we pay the electric bills, obviously, for those units. However, the app will charge an individual person for the time that they are using the kilowatt hours, and we dictate what that charge will be. So we would take what we're paying to Atlantic City Electric, and we would mark it up to a certain degree, and it would charge that person. That app, the software provider, then sends us a check on a monthly basis for the actual usage. We pay the bill. So we're paying up front for the electric, we're getting reimbursed by this check that comes in for the use of that charging station, but it's all done via app. Generally, there is no credit card machine there for people to use, and there is no cash. So they have to have the app on their phone, and then that app is how they pay for, just kind of like a Park Mobile, kind of works like that.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Farrell? Okay.
Fine.
All right, so Mr. Galzinis, you can circulate the draft ordinance and maybe we'll get it on the agenda for one of the February meetings for introduction. All right, moves on, item number 3, under new business, construction ordinance. So just to give everyone an overview, so the borough already has a construction ordinance. I think one of the biggest complaints that I think code enforcement receives, our construction office and even the administration is, what I'll call construction site maintenance, with silt fences and trash and debris and what you see on the construction site. So, had asked Mr. Allen to look, and Mr. Galzinis take a look at our construction ordinance. I'd like to ask Mr. Allen to provide an overview of what he believes some revisions to that ordinance that could be made that tighten things up. Welcome to your first meeting here, Mr. Allen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Commissioners. Last year, it was my first year working for the borough, and we received numerous complaints on a daily basis. Our code enforcement officer he's done work. He works part-time, so after 12, we basically take the calls, and constant complaints about site maintenance, trash, debris blowing around, and we already presently had in existing ordinances where sites were to be either fenced in with a silt fence or a plywood barrier, 24 inches tall with an opening. And a lot of that wasn't happening, and I think it needs to be happening to eliminate a lot of the calls. But another problem we had was like the spotted pots being out by the sidewalk, doors flapping open, blown over in the wind, the stuff spilling out on the sidewalk. Obviously, we have a lot of wind here, so we know, that's always going to be a factor. However, if the contractors were to follow the guidelines a little bit better, we probably could eliminate a lot of the calls. And I had also saw in other municipalities where they would place signs on the projects, like a 24 by 20 sign. It has the address, first of all, for response. If there's an emergency, the police know where they're going. And it will also display the permit for the inspection team to know where they're going, so they're not driving around looking for projects. And also the emergency contact number of the builder or the responsible person of the site. This way, I believe that a citizen, or if there's an emergency or even a police officer or a fireman's coming by, they have a number they could call right away. They're not calling the construction office on Saturday when no one's there, and we get the message on Monday. We have a screaming citizen. It's like, the guy was out there banging nails at 7 o'clock in the morning, or we're not in till 9, so we really can't do anything about it. And it's a little bit of, an issue. And I feel maybe posting the project with information of the builder that the people would be apt to call that number in the event of emergency or a complaint, or if the guy's blowing sawdust all over his car that he just washed. And so those are some of the things that Mr. Galzinis put in there. We had everything's pretty much existing other than the posting of the property. And then I know maybe there was some introduction about the larger sites that are greater than 80-foot frontage with possible like a fence, 6-foot fence with screening, kind of like on Rio Grande Avenue where they have all that construction going on. Keeps a lot of debris and, maybe some unsightliness for the summer crowd coming by where there might be a lot of trash or just stuff all over the place, where we know construction, it is what it is. I mean, you have to, it's a little bit dirty, but you can maintain it if you follow the rules. And the last thing I was going to say on that is if the new ordinance is adopted, that, I feel that it's a good idea that myself, code enforcement, whatever, we can go to the job sites and say, gentlemen, here's the law, here's the regulations, and we're giving you fair warning, and after this, we're going to have to enforce penalties and maybe, close the job down or until we get compliance of just to maintain some integrity of the borough with all the phone calls and people complaining and stuff. So.
Who has the enforcement powers? Is it construction official, code enforcement, and the police, the three?
I believe the police, they enforce, all the ordinances as far as the work times and the sound, decibels. As far as construction sites, I believe
It's all free there.
if you adopted the International Property Maintenance Code, it gives the code enforcement officer those responsibilities. The municipality can also denote construction as well to step in. We're more or less regulated by the Uniform Construction Code for our enforcement responsibilities.
Okay.
However, the municipality can also put that onto the construction official as well if they choose.
Okay, so there's a draft ordinance that needs to be circulated to the governing body, and then perhaps we can, if everyone's on board with it, we can move forward on it at a February meeting as well. I know that takes about roughly 2 months to make any respective changes and so forth, so that puts us right around end of March,
Yes.
Right on time.
right in time for the what I'll call this warm season, everybody out and about, so it'd be nice to get something in place. Governing body, any questions from that?
I think there are very good recommendations.
Thank you.
I think they'll work well.
Thank you.
I agree, with the signage especially.
Thank you.
All right. So the fourth item on the agenda is the proposed floodplain ordinance. So I had asked Mr. Allen to come and speak to what I'll call, it's a state-driven ordinance that has some tight timeframes to be adopted, I believe, by March the 7th. 30th, I'm sorry, March the 30th, which means that we would need to introduce this potentially probably at our next meeting. However, that said, I can't honestly say that I like what I'm seeing. I'll let Mr. Allen overview the issues that I think our residential tax-paying owners need to be aware of.
Well, the first thing I guess we need to define, which most people aren't aware of, the borough is in a complete floodplain, so we're in a special flood hazard area, which means any federally backed mortgages or private lenders, they require flood insurance. When you carry flood insurance, you are regulated by the National Flood Insurance, NFIP. So they determine what is the definition of substantial improvement, which means when you do repairs on your home, whether roofing, siding, home elevation, any type of development is defined as these type of items. So currently, if substantial improvement it's based on the improvement value of your home. It's not technically the land, it's just the structure. So for instance, you could have a property that's worth $500,000, but the building's only worth $100,000. So if you cross the substantial improvement threshold, which is 50% of the value of your home, you would have to be in the current compliance of the regulations, and the borough regulations are to be 2 feet above base flood elevation. And what that means, I mean, it's a lot of information if those aren't aware, but we have different elevations that are based on the sea level. So you may be in an elevation 8, elevation 9, elevation 10, which is considered the base flood elevation. Any new construction or substantial improvement has to be built 1 foot above base flood elevation by state law. The borough has a regulation of 2 feet above the base flood elevation, which gives our residents a discount in their flood insurance through the CRS program. A lot of other neighboring municipalities have the same thing. Some are +2, some are +3. Going to +3 would be a little tough, I think. I think +2 keeps us where we should be. It keeps us current with all of our CRS points. There is some time frames in the model ordinance where we may be able to dictate the look-back time of, you know, a lot of it is in a 10-year period. If you, to break that 50% threshold, it's cumulative. So you may put a roof on your house this year. Say your house is $100,000 of improvement value. That means you have $50,000 to work with over a 10-year period. All right, so this year I put a new roof on. Well, that's $20,000. Next year I did a kitchen. It's another $20,000. I come into the third year, I want to do roofing, siding, windows. It's $40,000. Now I'm exceeded my substantial improvement value. So the construction office, we say, well, let us see your flood elevation certificate to determine where your first floor elevation is. If that's not 2 feet above your zone, like if you're in an 8 zone, if you're not at 10, if you're 9.6, you have to elevate your home. And it can be very disheartening and very hard to tell people this. And I do it I have to do it a lot, and, you know, I have two right now that the people are, and there are ways, there are some exceptions. You can get a private appraisal, maybe it'll bring your improvement value up. FEMA has a breakdown sheet for your vendors to use for their calculations of materials and time and labor, but they have to be market value. You can't say, well, me and my buddies are gonna do it. It doesn't matter. You have to pay, even as a homeowner, as a friend, a family, you have to pay yourself a going rate of a carpenter, $30, $40 an hour, plumber, $40, $50, you know, so they have to all be delineated in these breakdown sheets, and it's a tough thing, but, you know, FEMA's really driving a lot of this stuff because of the payouts and, you know, hazardous storms or more reoccurring storms that we're having. I can answer any questions on it as best as I can. I don't know where we stand with having to introduce that, or like if the state's saying you have to do these things, or maybe there's only a few things that we can tweak a little bit to not, you know, we try to help the residents as much as we can, but we have to follow the laws. And we're kind of like, you know, in a catch-22 at some times.
So, Rick, just to confirm, so this would be they need a separate permit, a floodplain permit from the construction office. That's a new permit.
Well, yeah, so to further elaborate on that with the substantial improvement, a lot of things that you are required to have a construction permit for, things that are counted against your house as development, you don't need a construction permit for. Kitchen cabinets, flooring, siding on a single-family home, roofing, replacement windows if you don't alter the opening, you know, crown molding, trim, new carpeting. These are all elements you do not need a building permit for. They're defined as ordinary maintenance. So the only way that FEMA could keep track of, because this has been in place for a long time, the only way they could keep track of the 50% is through the building department, all the permits that were pulled. And you go back over the years and see how, you know, how much a guy had spent on his home. Well, now they figured there's no way for them to cumulatively track these numbers. So they want to establish the floodplain development permit, which it's kind of already established, but we haven't adopted it into our ordinances. That if a homeowner calls up and says, hey, you know, a lot of people don't know, they say, we're gonna do a kitchen cabinet, we're gonna do flooring, you know, we're gonna do this, some crown molding and tray ceiling, and we're gonna cut a closet out and move it over and move a bathroom wall over. Well, they only need the building permit for that, moving the wall over. So maybe that's $1,000 worth of work on the UCC side, the construction permit. All the other stuff they would need a floodplain development permit for. And we would have to keep track of that and file it in a separate file. We don't even have the computer system. We'd have to paper file that to say, okay, 203 East Newark, you know, in 2021, he put new kitchen in, and then he did this, and he would have a file in the drawer for us to accumulate. So every time someone would come in, we'd have to go to that file and see where their numbers are, breaking that 50% rule. Very time consuming, more work for the construction department. You know, then you also have to put a fee on this as well. For we're gonna have more work to do, so a citizen's gonna say, you know, well, what the heck is a floodplain permit? And, you know, all right, I'm gonna do the kitchens, I'm gonna put all new bathroom fixtures. So it's gonna cost X, and then we have to take it, and you have to tell me everything that you're putting in your home, and then we're gonna put that in a file count. Now, there's a model, actually, I think it's a 14-page application from
Right.
we can skinny that down a little
I
bit.
just want to touch right what you just said. So there's potentially another fee, not just the construction side, but the floodplain certificate.
Right.
We're going to have to charge our residents that are doing basic maintenance work. We're going to have more work done in the construction hall, potentially more labor, charge the resident that's just trying to do upgrade the inside of their home, just using this
Right,
as an
maintenance
example.
work, yes.
Only to them, so they're gonna pay more, and then we're gonna say, oh, well, you can save money in your flood insurance. Is it really a win-win? I guess, like, you're paying more here, but you may save over here, but you're still gonna pay more over here. And at the end of the day, the labor and the work in that office is gonna be double,
Yes.
if not more than that.
Well, I've already seen situations in other municipalities
Insane.
where somebody's doing a project and they put $70,000 on there because they're doing a kitchen and doing all this work, but the way the Uniform Construction Code says, you don't need a permit for all these things, other than if you alter a wall, add a wall, cut a stud. So maybe you guys gonna, cut a wall out, put a stud in to hold the header up and build a closet. Okay, well so out of that $70,000, that's not with the construction side of the permit, that might be $4,000. So now you have to take the rest of that money and put that to the floodplain permit side of it. So now it's like double permit, double work. You would charge the uniform construction dictated by the Uniform Construction Code fees for that construction permit, and then the floodplain permit would be X, whatever the municipality denotes it as. So it's kind of like double work. A lot of it here again is driven by FEMA. I don't know how we don't have to follow it, but I guess there's some things that we can take the model ordinance and draft it and shoot it back to them for their review and see where we stand with it.
Who at the state which agency is it that's,
Department of Dam and Flood Management.
they're pushing,
Dave Rosenblatt's
who's all,
office.
so they keep pushing us, on all municipalities, I'm not just gonna say us, but all the municipalities to make sure this ordinance gets done in a timely basis. So
Trish is getting.
if we were going to,
Reminders.
if we were going to fight City Hall for, and we are City Halls, but if we're going to dig in on this, because I can't honestly say, I can't in good conscience put something in, this is insane.
The Department of Environmental Protection, New Jersey DEP, Division of Flood and
Dam safety and flood
Dam and
engineering.
flood. It was under Dave Rosenblatt, he recently retired.
You said there was a new hire there,
So,
correct?
what's the benefit, I guess? At the end of the day, what does the
What's driving
FEMA
this?
or state, what do they believe is the benefit to?
Insurance,
The insurance
So
companies.
they're gonna make you pay more to save more over here.
and make you prove that you got permits and there's a
Yeah.
record of the improvements you made in order for it to be covered, would be my guess.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to stop people from fixing up houses that could be a hazard, that could be flooded. Here in the Crest, we're a little higher. We don't seem like we have that many claims going back into repetitive loss and stuff, some on the west side. But they're looking at it as the whole island's a floodplain, sea level rise, more reoccurring storms. So we as the insurance NFIP, we don't want to keep paying money out. So if we get these people to get their homes up 2-3 feet above the flood elevation, or even higher if you put a garage underneath, that's what their main goal is. Their main goal is to get the older properties out and get the, either the older properties elevated or new structures built in place. That's their main, goal when you read through a lot of the books. They're not looking at it as, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we still feel sorry for you. They're looking at it as, billions of dollars that they pay out in insurance claims.
It's the result of Sandy. And all the claims that were filed.
I agree with the mayor. I have a hard time with this too. I mean, this is ridiculous, but I think our challenge will be trying to educate the public.
That's one thing where we could gain some points in our CRS program is some public outreach stuff, which I spoke to a few people at the convention in Atlantic City. And, being an election year, I knew we were gonna have changes, and I was kind of waiting to present that to see maybe we could have some kind of public outreach because a lot of people are really clueless when they call the construction office. They have, I start talking to them and I'm like, we really need to spend some time here so you understand. They just want to fix their house. I get it, it's the American dream. We want to have a nice place. We want to work on it. We sink every cent we save into it. And a lot of it comes down to enforceability too. Are we sending a man out on the street to drive around? The guy's loading some flooring in his house and he doesn't need a construction permit? I don't know. I don't think that that's the case, but rules are rules. So if people call and they say, oh, Rick, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, I have to say, hey, well, you need a floodplain permit because that's our requirement. So it's something we really need to look into deeply.
I have a question. Is the planning board involved with this at all? Do you foresee?
Not at this
I don't believe
time.
that has anything to do with it, the planning board, no. No,
Zoning
it's-
wouldn't be either. It wouldn't be a zoning
No,
issue.
no, they're only looking at, like, Mr. Blasco said about applications that may get denied, or town, the planning board's looking at, town projects, a master plan, and zoning board's looking at individual applicants that are trying to do something outside the confines of the zoning regulations. So, this is more the governing body, the mayor being the chief executive officer of our municipality, that's what it really comes down to.
Anybody else have any more questions? Mr. Galzunas, you have any comments, suggestions?
No, I'm just interested to see if there's any organized pushback from the press for widespread adoption throughout the state for all municipalities. This seems to be a hammer approach rather than just a natural, as properties are demoed, reconstructed, they're elevated. And really, one of the big drivers for elevating properties was the cost of insurance, which is based on the elevation of your house. As your insurance bill creeps up to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 per year, it then becomes economical at that point to raise your house. Things were traveling along. It wasn't that properties, we can all drive around town and see that they're being elevated and reconstructed. It was happening. I think that the state just wants to see it happen a little more quickly and wants to do it in a heavy-handed regulatory manner. As Mr. Allen points out, we would need a swarm of code enforcement officials peeking into everyone's home to see if they changed the faucet on their sink and add that, and they need a floodplain development permit for that. Not being smart, faucets are specifically mentioned in these regulations.
You're not
So
liable.
unless
That
municipalities.
That comes under development.
It's insane.
Development is everything
Municipalities-
except a mailbox and landscaping, basically.
Right, so, I think this is when municipalities become cognizant of what they're being asked to do is this commission, I think your eyes just opened up as what's happening here. Maybe there's some pushback here, and we've all seen these regulations go back and get revised, and
Yeah.
so I would recommend, we have to do what we have to do, but I wouldn't rush and fall over ourselves to do it. I would take as much time as we are allowed to see what happens and to see if there's any changes before we rush into, blindly adhering to this and adopting this ordinance.
So I just want to go to the example that Mr. Allen gave, a $100,000 house. A house is worth $100,000. If it gets to the 50% number, you have to raise it to base flood plus one.
Plus two
Plus
by
two.
borough code.
By
Yes,
borough
'cause
code. So you're raising your house.
We've adopted that.
So it's very simple. It's be very easy to get to the 50% mark. Now, we all know we're in this pandemic, and costs of materials and labor and everything is through the roof. So it's naturally already skyrocketed. So we're going to get to that 50% number a lot faster than it was, say, pre-COVID.
Right.
Insane.
Values have gone up on properties, but it's still, it is insane. And I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on what Mr. Galzunas was saying about the insurance. Right now, you have two types. It's pre-firm and post-firm. Pre-firm means a building that was constructed, the firm stands for flood insurance rate map. So a property was built before the flood insurance rate map. Say it was built in 1940, 1950. This didn't really come into play until 1968. So a pre-firm building is, the insurance is based on the age of the building and type of building, not the floor elevation. A post-firm building that's constructed after the map, after the flood insurance rate map, is based on the height of the base flood elevation. So if you're in elevation 8 and your floor's at like 13 or 14, hey, you're doing well with your insurance costs. Pre-firm, my house, okay, I'm spending X on it. Now, I have a floor that's below DFE. They are going to start going around and actuarial rates are going to apply. So these insurance rates are going to start going up for people that aren't elevating their homes. So that's a whole nother aspect. They're trying to drive people to get these properties up. I think they can go up to like 25 or 30% over the next 15, 20 years. I'd have to look at the numbers, but it's somewhere around
What was it, how much? What was the percentage?
like 25 or 30% over the next, they're going to start skyrocketing. People have already called with concerns about this, and they're like, what can I do? I do want to elevate my home, because they know they're going to get hammered eventually in the future. You know, you could be paying $1,800, and, you know, in a couple of years, it could be $3,000-4,000, you know. That's another factor to try to drive people to elevate their homes. But here again, we have a lot of properties down here where we're in an X zone, or where we don't get hit that much, and people want to, you know, fix their house up a little bit, and then they're kind of stuck. You know, they're at 9.4 and they need to be at 10. So they can only, I have to say, look, I had to tell a gentleman, you know, he wanted to do a certain project, and he had to scale it back to not break the 50% rule. And he's just a grandpop that wants to have his kids come down and have an extra little playroom. It's tough, you know, but the job's the job. You have to do it, and the regulations say this, so that's part of it.
I think the state needs to carefully weigh the tourism dollars that come out of the shore areas and the island barrier island communities. What, $7 billion comes out of Cape County, right, or something like that. So weigh that against this type of law and the cost factors involved. Is it going to be counterproductive to people coming down here and investing in properties? Perhaps it could. I don't know if the state's really taken a hard look at that, the tourism dollars versus the benefit of this, and done like a little cost-benefit analysis, but it seems a little short-sighted and it seems punitive.
So, to any of the draft or any of the information coming from the state, was there a penalty mentioned that if a borough doesn't take, or any municipality takes no action? Was there anything mentioned?
I didn't hear anything about any penalties in any of the meetings that I was in.
So I hear through Madam Clerk that they're pushing, get the ordinance done, but nowhere to say, hey, if you don't get it done by X, you're gonna get whacked with whatever.
Is the webinar online that you guys took, is that available to replay?
Might be.
It might be.
It
Let's check
wasn't,
on
it
that
wasn't
and
real
we'll get back to
informative,
you.
but
It wasn't.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. I don't believe that they given people enough time to really look into this, because, I mean, I'm saying a lot of things up here. I would imagine anyone's listening probably doesn't have a clue on a few of the things I'm saying. And especially having an election year, we have a new commission coming in that have no clue of what. Now here's an adoption or an ordinance draft that we need to adopt this by January 7th. You know, it's an election season, holiday season, vacation season. Like, it seems like, how can they say if you don't have this done, you're going to be fined, or, you know, that I don't know, but it's something that we really need to look into.
Yeah,
into
some of these rules, if you look at the majority of the homes in the Crest are older homes that people are gonna wanna fix up and put investments in, build an addition, or just remodel the bathroom, or put new carpet or wood floors in. All that counts for this new additional costly permit that's gonna require more enforcement. Yeah, I don't know. And I
Property
understand
values are going up.
this was put in, with my understanding, is by administrative order, not through the legislation. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So then the last comment, I guess, and I'm done beating this horse, because the more I talk about it, the more aggravated I get. We're being told, you know, we're gonna have to put a dune on the ocean front. We're doing so much work and potential spending of tax dollars to improve the flooding on the island, but none of that is taken into consideration, right? We want you to do all this other stuff to prevent flooding, and now we're gonna take it one step further and really whack it to the residential homeowners. That's insane.
Yeah,
I can't get my hands around that.
That's the insurance companies that
So,
are trying.
Mayor, to go back to what if we don't, so the only thing that I could think of outside of some type of, you know, monetary fine or something like that, if we didn't do it, would be we're up for our renewal this year, or for our vote
April,
on, in
yeah.
April, of CRS, right, our community rating system. So if we don't have it done by then, we're in a tough situation, because that will be part of that review to see if we've done it. And if we're trying to attain a lower rating, which is the goal, we probably would struggle with that, because this would be one of the requirements.
Ron, you were talking about pushing back. Would it be wise for us to maybe start pushing? Or should we just let it sit and see what happens?
I think it's easier to push as, in a crowd.
Oh, I agree with you.
Municipality.
How do we get these people, how do we get these other municipalities together?
Cape County League of Municipalities, New Jersey League of Municipalities are a good place to start.
I think we should start.
I can't believe you folks are not looking at this. I mean, I get there's the flood insurance savings, but I'm not sure that offsets the everything else that we're talking about. It just, I'm not even just gonna say it's a wash, but anyway, so, all right, so maybe we circle the draft. I guess we have a little bit more work we need to do. I'm personally in no rush to get this thing moving. I'd like to get some things, get a little more details going. I think for the benefit of to Mr. Schiff's point, there's a lot of folks that don't know this even exists. We just found it, within the last month or so,
Right.
this is out there. So I think we need to take our time, make sure we get it right. If there's some changes to the ordinance that we can make, if there's some pushback we need to make, we can. If there's some lobbying we need to do in the county and the state and other municipalities, I think it's time to look at all that stuff. All right, governing body, any more questions for Mr. Allen?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, under old business, I have nothing new to report unless anybody else has anything. Hearing nothing, I'm gonna move to the last round of public comments. We'll start with anybody here in person. Anybody have any public comments? Name and address, please. Hearing none, I'll move on to the.
I have one comment that I wanted to make.
Go ahead.
I wanted to thank Joe Bond, Brian Melchior, and Ron Hardwood. We had a problem at a structure on Rambler. They came out, took care of the problem. I was informed about it. We got a great crew, but I wanted to thank them personally. That's all I got.
You got it. All right, anybody on the conference line have any public comments? Mr. Schiff, any public comments? Any comments? Mr. Franco. There's too many Joes.
You know what? We all look
I'm
alike.
like, well, Mr. Franco, Commissioner Schiff, there's too many Joes.
No, I'm fine.
I just started wearing these reading glasses after last year, and I'm gonna get a new pair. Anyway, sorry about that, Commissioner Franco. All right, we good?
We're good.
Anybody else? Last round? Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Make the motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
10:52.
Thank you, everybody.